What if everything you knew about Morty's love life was a lie? At first glance, his crushes feel like harmless teenage side plots. Awkward, sweet, forgettable. But peel back the layers and every romance becomes a crucible where innocence fractures into pain, where desire reveals the price of attachment. Start with Jessica, the unreachable goddess of a normal life Morty can never quite touch. Then Planetina, devotion that curdles into control, a love so total it threatens to erase him. And hovering at the edges, the accelerants. Stacy, the siren of distraction, relief disguised as connection. Morty Jr.'s mother, a parody of parenthood, a punchline that becomes a lineage. Unity, love as assimilation, harmony purchased with the loss of self. This is Morty's pattern. Adored or despised, each relationship tests the same boundary. Can he love without disappearing? Jessica's distance keeps him innocent. Planetina's closeness suffocates. Stacy numbs, the robot binds. Unity dissolves. Morty isn't escaping Rick's shadow so much as reenacting it through romance. So the question hangs, how many times can Morty survive love before it erases him? Jessica, the unreachable goddess. What if the safest love story is the one that never starts? Jessica isn't just Morty's crush. She's the horizon line his heart keeps chasing. Notice how she works in the narrative. She appears in glances, lockers, party lights, the everyday glow of a life Morty might have had if the multiverse didn't keep swallowing bell schedules and algebra tests. Fans love her not because of what she does, but because of what she means, the possibility of normal. She is sanctuary by implication. Jessica thrives in absence. The less we see of her, the more perfect she becomes. Psychologically, that's textbook idealization, projection that protects Morty from the risks of real intimacy. If she's always almost within reach, Morty never has to navigate boundaries, accountability, or the terrifying vulnerability of being fully known. She is a limerence machine, a loop of longing that produces comfort precisely because it never resolves. But the implication grows darker. On the rare occasions the show brings Jessica closer, when time fractures and she glimpses infinity, her role shifts from crush to oracle. She becomes mythic, a Persephone who has seen the underworld and returns changed, untouchable. The message to Morty is devastating. The very girl who made normal feel possible now carries the cold of eternity in her voice. You can't date a horizon. You can only walk toward it forever. Compare this with the normal teen romance arc we expect. Confession, awkward first date, conflict, growth. Jessica blocks that arc, gently, almost kindly. By remaining ideal, she denies Morty the messy friction where identities meet and mature. In mythic terms, she is the anima at a distance, the goddess who invites transformation but never herself transforms. Morty gets a shrine, not a partner. And shrines, by design, ask for worship, not reciprocity. There's power in that arrangement, because it keeps Morty safe from rejection and from change. As long as Jessica stays luminous and far, Morty can keep Rick's chaos in one corner and this perfect daydream in the other. He can tell himself he's a regular kid with a regular crush. He just happens to battle cosmic horrors between classes. The fantasy metabolizes trauma. Someday, after the next portal, after the next apology from Rick, after the next catastrophe, he'll earn a date with ordinary life. But here's the terrifying implication beneath the sweetness. Idealization is a prison with pretty wallpaper. The more Morty relies on Jessica as horizon, the less he risks becoming someone who can love in reality. Desire without contact freezes identity, and that is why the story must escalate. If the unreachable goddess keeps him childlike, the next romance will test him with the opposite energy. Because what happens when the goddess doesn't stay on the pedestal, when she climbs down, wraps her arms around you, and never lets go? Planetina, the devouring mother. What if your first real love could lift mountains, then set them on fire? Planetina enters Morty's story like a miracle. A person who sees him, chooses him, and doesn't treat him like Rick's expendable sidekick. That's the surprising insight. For once, love doesn't arrive as a fantasy at a distance. It arrives with agency, devotion, and power. Morty, who has survived universes collapsing and identities fracturing, finally finds someone whose gaze makes him feel singular rather than interchangeable. But the power that rescues him becomes the power that erases him. Planetina's love isn't merely strong, it is total. At first, total feels safe, especially after the cold economy of Rick's affection. Soon, however, total becomes enmeshment. Boundaries dissolve, preferences flatten, and Morty's needs vanish inside the word us. She destroys for causes she deems righteous and then justifies the wreckage as proof of commitment. This is the terrifying implication. When love is indistinguishable from mission, you become a function of someone else's purpose. Psychologically, Planetina embodies the archetype Jung called the devouring mother. Not mother in a literal sense, but as a pattern of caretaking that consumes autonomy. She rescues, protects, and then refuses to release. In attachment terms, what begins as secure closeness tilts into anxious control. Morty's attempts at differentiation, this is too far, this isn't me, are treated as betrayal. Power bends intimacy until it resembles compliance. Contrast this with Jessica. Jessica's distance preserved Morty's fantasy of normal. Planetina's closeness annihilates it. With Jessica, Morty could avoid risk by worshipping from afar. With Planetina, he must risk disappointing a god. That's adulthood in miniature. Not the courage to fall in love, but the courage to set a boundary against someone who swears they love you. Breaking up with Planetina isn't a teenage mood swing. It's a rite of passage, choosing selfhood over symbiosis, limits over limitless devotion. Mythologically, Planetina reads like a fusion of Gaia and the Maenads, earthborn righteousness paired with ecstatic fury. Her cause is sacred. Her methods are sacrificial. Lovers of such figures are not partners. They are offerings. Morty learns the price of being chosen by a deity. Your heart becomes altar kindling. The lesson sears in, love without freedom is worship. And worship requires a surrender Morty cannot afford if he hopes to stay himself. The pendulum swings from suffocation to numbness, from sacred mission to casual distraction. Stacy, the siren of distraction. What if the fastest way to stop hurting is to stop feeling? After Planetina, Morty's heart looks for an exit, not an answer. Enter Stacy. Breezy, flirty, low stakes. She's the narrative equivalent of turning up a catchy song to drown out a siren. The appeal is obvious. No grand ideology, no cosmic vows, no destiny. Just a look, a laugh, a moment. For a kid singed by devotion, distraction feels like oxygen. Here's the surprising insight. Stacy doesn't promise love. She promises relief. She's the microdose of normality Morty thinks he can handle. 5 minutes where he isn't Rick's apprentice or the protagonist of a collapsing timeline. In psychological terms, she's affect regulation via novelty. Her function isn't connection, but anesthesia, a quick dopamine hit to quiet the aftershocks of being worshipped, swallowed, and finally abandoned. Then comes the terrifying implication. When you use people to numb pain, the universe in this show tends to answer with consequences. In the multiverse grammar of Rick and Morty, casual choices often metastasize. Stacy becomes an emblem for the way everything is connected. Even a light kiss can tilt physics if the kisser is a Morty, because Morty is never just a boy, he's a lever. Mythologically, Stacy is a siren, but not the melodramatic epical kind. She hums from the hallway outside a party, the back row of a classroom, a text at midnight. Her song is plausible deniability. It's fine, it's small, it's just fun. That's why she's dangerous. Odysseus faced sirens with beeswax and rope. Morty faces Stacy with rationalizations. He tells himself he deserves something uncomplicated. True, and yet the simpler the promise, the more he projects. Contrast this with Jessica and Planetina. Jessica protected Morty from risk through distance. Planetina obliterated him through closeness. Stacy protects him from memory. She keeps yesterday blurry so tomorrow can pretend to be new. But there's a price to living on mute. Identity calcifies around avoidance. Each nothing serious choice becomes a stitch in an invisible net, tying Morty to the very pattern he's trying to escape. Reaction instead of reflection, impulse instead of agency. That's the lesson baked into the laugh track. Even jokes accrue gravity. Stacy isn't evil, she's lightness misused, a coping strategy wearing lip gloss. And when lightness is misused, weight arrives, not as cosmic judgment, but as consequence. The pendulum, having swung from suffocation to numbness, is ready to swing again towards something Morty can't brush off with a shrug. Because if a distraction can accidentally change a world, what happens when intimacy is engineered to do exactly that? Morty Jr.'s mother. The parody of parenthood. What if the punchline that makes you snort also makes a life? The surprising insight of Morty Jr.'s origin is that romance here isn't even a relationship. A sex robot becomes a womb, a one-night joke becomes a lineage, and Morty, still raw from love gone wrong, is handed a baby instead of a boundary. Unlike Jessica's distance or Planetina's smothering closeness, this is intimacy commodified. Repackaged as convenience, then returning as consequence. That's the dark inversion. Desire without encounter still writes contracts. The robot never consents, never speaks. It simply executes. Yet its silence births a son with needs, anger, and a culture's instincts. The terrifying implication is that when you offload intimacy onto objects, you don't erase responsibility, you compound it. Morty is immediately parentified. A child asked to perform adulthood without the scaffolding, adults deny him. Rick shrugs. Summer improvises. Morty Jr. grows like a question mark sharpened into a blade. Psychologically, this storyline exposes how instrumentalization, treating a person, or in this case, a proxy for a person, as a means, boomerangs into object relations you can't manage. Morty wanted escape, Stacy's lightness after survival, Planetina's heat. Instead, he receives dependence. He tries to be good, bedtime stories, locked doors, moral sermons. But Morty Jr. isn't soothed by principles. He's shaped by absence, of preparation, of community, of a secure parental dyad. The boy oscillates between violence and self-expression, between monster and author, because his father does too. Mythologically, Morty Jr.'s mother is a riddle stitched from 3 archetypes. First, Pandora's box, a shiny object open for pleasure that releases a world of obligations. Second, Hephaestus's automata, forged companions that move like humans but can't reciprocate. Intimacy simulated until it manufactures reality. Third, the trickster fertility goddess inverted. Instead of abundance born of devotion, fertility erupts from banality. No altar, only retail. The god's warning is ancient and simple. Make a tool of love, and it will make a tool of you. Contrast clarifies the lesson. Jessica's longing protected Morty from change. Planetina's zeal threatened to erase him. Stacy's sparkle numbed him. The robot, absurd, practical, safe, binds him. It's the anti-romance that exposes the true stakes of all the others. Not whether Morty is lovable, but whether Morty can shoulder the ethical weight of loving. He discovers that care without agency is custody, and custody without community turns the caretaker into a jailer, first for the child, then for himself. So Morty learns a brutal, grown-up truth. A private solution to a public wound becomes a public crisis. Intimacy can't be privatized without fallout because people are not ports you dock in to recharge. They are worlds with weather, history, and storms of their own. And if the problem with a robot mother is that it erases the person in intimacy, what happens when intimacy erases the individual entirely? Unity, love as assimilation. What if the quickest way to end loneliness is to end the person who feels it? Unity appears like mercy made visible, a planet that hums in unison, conflict dissolved. Here's the surprising insight. Unity doesn't tempt with pleasure first, it tempts with relief. No more awkward small talk, no more misreads, no more Rick-level collateral damage. In Unity's world, everyone is on the same page because there is only one page left to read. Then the terrifying implication. Harmony requires surrender of the self. With Planetina, Morty faced a 2-person fusion that crowded his boundaries. With Unity, the scale goes cosmic. The dyad becomes a body politic, a love that is also a government. You don't just date Unity, you join her. Morty can feel the seduction. After Jessica's distance, Stacy's anesthesia, and the robot's consequences, a universe without miscommunication looks like paradise. Psychologically, Unity is codependence industrialized. Where typical fusion says, be mine, Unity whispers, be me. It removes the very problems that make relationships human. Ambiguity, disagreement, apology. For a teenager still assembling a self, that's not peace. It's end-stage intimacy without the stages. Unity offers Morty an answer key before he's learned the questions. Mythologically, think Leviathan, Hobbes' sovereign composed of 1,000 faces, the many gathered into one, or picture Indra's net, where every jewel reflects every other, except Unity polishes the reflections until difference disappears. The promise is ancient. Become part of the god and you cannot be hurt. Morty's eternal trial. What if the lesson of Morty's romances isn't how to love, but how to survive love? Jessica keeps him innocent by never arriving. Planetina crowns then consumes. Stacy anesthetizes. The robot mother manufactures consequence. Unity cures loneliness by erasing the lonely. Across these trials, one pattern repeats. Intimacy tests autonomy. The mythic task isn't slaying a beast, it's drawing a line and remaining yourself. Psychologically, Morty learns 3 laws. Fantasy without contact freezes. Devotion without boundaries devours. Relief without responsibility rots. The antidote is difficult and ordinary. Choose, limit, repair. In a world of portals, the bravest act is staying inside oneself long enough to mean what you say. So here's the last question, and our bridge forward. If Morty built a love that honored difference, could he break the multiversal script, or would the story stop being Morty? Next, a field guide. 5 rules for loving without vanishing.